Hello everybody, welcome to today's Facebook Live, which is all about family disputes. As a mediator and solicitor, I deal with business and family disputes, and today I'll be talking about how I help families come to a resolution. And Laurel will also be asking some questions as well, and please feel free to ask your own questions. You'll have your own thoughts and also things that you'd like me to clear up for you. So, family disputes and families at war. How do I come to be involved in dealing with that in my mediation practice? You'll all know families, if not your own, where disagreements arise, and sadly in many cases they escalate to the point where there's a full-blown dispute. People either are not talking to each other over particular issues that they have disagreed on, and usually in that situation people will turn to a litigation solicitor and say, have we got a case? What do we do? Is it appropriate at all when we're a family? Should we be disagreeing in this way? Why can't we sort it out ourselves? And sometimes the litigation solicitor will tell some home truths, literally, and say, you really should be sitting down with each other and resolving this amongst yourselves. This is what families are about, and this is what families do. But in other cases, if that's not possible and the dispute has gone to a stage where parties are even talking about bringing proceedings against other members of the family, then it's got to a very serious and potentially a very difficult stage. Nobody really wants to air their dirty laundry in public, and if you're issuing proceedings, then that's exactly what you'll be doing. So you have to be prepared to face the consequences of anybody in your community and beyond knowing what your dispute is all about. So one of the best ways of being helped to find a resolution in those circumstances and to keep the matter confidential is to go to mediation. Now, I've been involved in a number of family disputes which, if they had become public, would be very, very nasty and unpleasant for the parties involved. I look upon it and think how unfortunate and sad it is that the parties are even arguing, but there it is. By the time it comes to me, we're usually faced with a situation where parts of the family are taking one view and parts of the family are taking an opposite view, and of course each party believes that they're right and the other party is wrong. And in those situations, when it's got that extreme, often it's too entrenched for the parties to stand back and see what's really going on, and what's really going on is the family being cut in half, and that's terribly sad, and it's terribly difficult to deal with. Now, I'm used to sitting in the middle. Usually, when we get to this stage, the parties will not wish to be sitting in the same room as each other. That's not always the case. Sometimes they do, but in most cases, I found that people don't want to sit in the same room as each other. But nevertheless, if they have got to the point where they are prepared to try and find a resolution to the dispute, that's a huge step forward. And then normally what happens in those situations is I will go and see separately each party before the mediation meeting and talk through with them and their solicitors, if their solicitors wish to be at the meeting as well, and talk through with them what they see as the problem and how they see a possible solution. Because one of the key features of mediation is that when you get to a point where you have engaged a mediator, you try and keep looking forward. The history of the matter is complicated, it's emotive, often based on pride and ego, and not always necessarily what the parties present at the mediation it's actually about. Now, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not a counsellor, so my role is to help them find a solution that they can live with. My role isn't to work out what it was in their childhood that might have caused this difference of opinion to have resurfaced. But inevitably, when you're trying to find a solution, help find a solution to the problem, inevitably you're given information from the past, and you absorb that, but you try not to let it directly affect your objective thinking around the issues, because as I mentioned just a moment ago, the object of the exercise is to keep moving forward towards a settlement, and in my experience, if you're going to be able to do that, you should keep going back over he said, she said, this happened, that happened, and if they hadn't have done this, then I wouldn't have done that, and it's their fault, and it's not my fault. So I'm right and they're wrong. Why can't they hear me say that? Why can't they understand that it happened the way I told you it happened, and it didn't happen the way that they told me it happened? So there's always a lot of complex emotions at play. If, as is usually the case, as I mentioned just before, the participants don't sit in the same room, then that really helps to enable me to shuttle backwards and forwards in an unemotive way. And because the participants are not facing each other across the table, they don't have to deal with the direct emotion of looking the other party in the eye. That can sometimes be helpful. Sometimes it is useful to sit across the table and say exactly what you think, because sometimes you won't have had the opportunity to do so for weeks, months, years. But of course, that's a much more risky strategy, because it could all end in tears. So how do we help in a situation where a family relationship has broken down? What is it about? Well, of course, it can be about many things. It can be about a relationship that has gone sour, and as a result of that, something's happened. It tends to be about money, sadly. it tends to be about miscommunication. If only they had heard me say such and such, or if they'd fully understood that this was the situation, then we wouldn't be in this mess now. But sadly, the money seems to be a driving factor. We all have our own value of money. We all have our own reasons for wanting more money or not needing more money. But the disputes that I've seen have pretty much all had money involved in them somewhere. Now, what do we do to help resolve that when money is involved? Well, I always look at money as being finite, linear. If A says that B owes them £100,000, in instalments, or can't pay, or disputes the fact that the money is owed at all, but it's not rocket science in terms of what the options are for paying money one way or the other. And therefore, whilst I mentioned earlier that part of what I do involves high emotion, and it involves principle, and it involves ego. It doesn't always follow that you can separate the money from what is actually driving this, and so it's a very fine. The negotiation over how money is paid, when it is paid, how much is paid, can trigger the emotive discussions all the more. But it still doesn't take away from the fact that the money is linear and finite. And as I said, either you can pay, or you can pay in instalments, or you can't pay. So one of the great strengths of mediation is that by sitting in the same building but in different rooms, the mediator is able to go backwards and forwards to help work out in a relatively short time, because if this all happens within a day, the mediator is actually able to help answer questions that perhaps in litigation, in correspondence, would take many months, and often people hiding behind correspondence, either directly or through solicitors, may not provide all the information that helps the other party to make a judgment on whether or not this money is actually realizable. So the mediation process, with meetings before the mediation and for a one-day mediation, can short circuit many of the discussions and correspondence that might take months or possibly years to draw out. And the advantage of doing this in a mediation context is that it's non-confrontational, it's non-adversarial. Parties can work with the mediator. The solicitors can work with the mediator to help find a solution that all parties can live with. And so in mediation, you will get something. In litigation, you may get nothing. And of course, you may be in a much worse position, because if you lose, you will not only have to usually have to pay your own costs, but the costs or the tax costs of the party who wins. So litigation is a high risk and high cost and high emotional and high time-consuming exercise, and mediation can help to resolve a dispute much quicker than in litigation. Now, I do a lot of work with litigators. It's not the case that mediation and litigation are in competition with each other, because certainly over the time that I've been mediating, I've noticed a big change in approach of litigators who are embracing mediation now as part of their toolkit. The courts are much keener to direct people to mediate. They are under huge pressure with massive caseloads, and that can only get worse as more courts are being shut by the government to raise money to reduce costs. So it is, I think it's inevitable that there will be more mediation, and that makes a lot of sense in terms of saving costs, saving time, saving stress. And so I see mediation as continuing to work alongside litigation, because there will always be cases which do need to be litigated if they're important enough to set a new precedent, if they are about a matter of public policy. But most cases can be mediated, and the more that people grow to understand that, the better the whole justice process will work for the benefit of everybody. I've watched at the beginning of this year the introduction of a new mediation act in Ireland, which has set out in detail the way the mediation process works, and solicitors there have to advise their clients of the strengths and the reasons why mediation should help them, and then they have to swear a statutory declaration to the court to confirm that they've done so. So it's very early days yet, but I'm interested to see how that develops and how it could possibly apply over here, because it seems to me that it's a very good template for mediation practice over here. So I have probably talked enough before introducing some questions. I can see that Laurel's just asked the question, and I'm happy to, of course, to answer that. She says that when emotions in such disputes are so high, how do I stay cool? As a neutral, I'm detached from the emotions that are at play. I have nothing to gain by either side winning in inverted commas, because it's very, it's very against what mediation is concerned about, to look at winning and losing. That's what litigation does. But I stay detached because one, because that's my role. I'm used to doing that. But two, because I have the benefit of seeing both sides, not just in terms of what each side tells the other, but also because I am confided by each party separately in looking at where they think the case might go from a confidential point of view, and that neutrality, that distance, enables me to stand back and not get involved. Obviously, that wouldn't help. It wouldn't be appropriate. But it doesn't happen because I take a lot of strength from the neutrality of my position, and the independence and the independence and trust as well, which is invested in me. I have to earn that trust, and it doesn't happen without me being able to earn it. But once I got to that point, I appreciate that it's a dispute that is the parties to choose whether and to the extent that they wish to resolve it. They can choose to push themselves hard. They can choose to go outside their comfort zone in order to try and reach a settlement. And usually, if they do, the other party will also do the same. And then, then we're starting to talk about settlement proposals. But if each party isn't prepared to come out of their corner, if each party only comes to negotiate on their own terms, then it's not going to go anywhere. However experienced or not the mediator might be. So I have to keep reminding myself, and I have to keep reminding the parties that it's their dispute to do with as they choose. And if one or both or more of them decide that it's not going to be settled today, then so be it. Does anyone have any questions before I continue? Okay. I touched on earlier whether it's just is it about the money? Is it only about the money? I'm often told by people that it's not about the money. It's more important than that. It's the principle. And if they hadn't done this to me, if they hadn't done that to me, then we wouldn't be here. So it's their responsibility to move towards me, because they must be able to see what they've done. And if I had a £10 note for every time I've been told it's not about the money, but actually it is about the money. It's amazing how people can try and hide behind that kind of argument, when in fact all that they're interested in is I want my money. And what does I want my money mean? Am I Fagin and I just want to cuddle the money? Am I do I have to pay X out of the money that I'm looking to receive, and therefore I've I have a certain amount to spare? And if that's the case, why do I need the extra money? Is it that I don't have to pay off anybody else, and it's just, it would be nice to have that money, but I don't have to have it? And so all these thoughts are going through my mind. I'm not entirely sure how much they're going through the participants' mind, but I try and share these thoughts with them when they say to me, I want my money. And it's to me it's drawn out from me many different conversations in my mind about what that actually means, because we just take it for granted sometimes that when I say I want my money, we all know what that means. Well, okay, in a linear sense, yes, we do, because I want £100,000 and I want £100,000 now. But firstly, as I mentioned earlier, it may be that that they haven't got £100,000 to give me, or maybe they would be able to give me £100,000 in 10 instalments, or maybe for X reason or Y reason they are not going to give me any money. They might have the money, but they're not going to give me any money, and then we have a fight over it. So it's never quite as straightforward as you think it might be, by saying I want my money. Is it about the money? And feel free to chip in with any questions if you have any. Okay, so I will continue with how does mediation differ from litigation. What I mentioned earlier, that mediation, in my view, can go hand in hand with litigation. Often a case has gone, or proceedings have been issued, and so the litigation process has started, but the court has said, we will expect you to resolve this by mediation within 3 months. Go away and sort it out. Don't come back without a settlement. And so there, I see very much a partnership between the litigation process and mediation. Mediation still hoping to help resolve the dispute, so that if a resolution is reached, the court will then be told by the parties in a settlement agreement, this litigation has been settled on these terms. I often get involved in helping with mediation before litigation has been instigated, before proceedings have been issued. Issuing court proceedings is now much more expensive than it used to be, just because of the issue fees having increased a couple of years ago, and the incentive is there for people to try and resolve the dispute before issuing proceedings. If you have a claim for £200,000, the court issue fee will be £10,000 before you do anything, and that's a huge disincentive to people to issue proceedings. So I am finding more and more now that parties are getting together before issuing proceedings. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it on their own. They're usually doing it with solicitors, and usually solicitors are acting on both sides. But they are very sensibly saying to their clients, it's in your interest to try and find a resolution before we issue proceedings. And as I mentioned earlier, the huge disadvantage of publicity once proceedings are issued, that's a huge incentive in itself for people to find a resolution to this before they issue proceedings. So I think we're just heading over the half an hour mark now. If anybody wishes to ask any questions, please do so. Otherwise, I'm going to wind up now. Feel free to contact me afterwards, either via Laurel or via the Facebook page, or my website, which is cryptically called RogerLevitt.mediation.co.uk. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the day.